Hey guys, my name is Will Chow, and I'm here with a very special guest, Kevin Kreider. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Kevin Kreider. I'm a Korean American adoptee, fitness, life coach, and also a model.
Awesome. So I'm very excited to have this guy here. He's done so many incredible things. He recently spoke at a TEDx event and really talked greatly about Asian masculinity. And I want to start with this documentary that you're really excited about. Can you tell me what this documentary is and how you were a part of it?
Yeah, the documentary that I was asked to be a part of, it was by two Asian women who were curious about this issue of masculinity when I spoke about how growing up I didn't feel very sexually attractive or desired or feel like I could be successful except for at subjects like math and science, and not ripping on math and science, but I wanted different options in my life. And because I was horrible at math and science, I felt like I wasn't going to turn out to be anything in my life. And they were very curious about that because all of these issues of these celebrities coming out talking about how there's not equal treatment in Hollywood and movies, they were really interested from a model and a fitness coach's perspective because they said, how would you ever have any issues and problems growing up? And so I shared my story, and then they were like, well, let's make this a documentary. And then I just decided to do a TED Talk on it because I was thinking this could be really big impact in front of the stage and having people listen to this. And that's really where it came from, the start of the documentary. The documentary is about my whole life as a Korean American adoptee, having white parents, being in a white society, the bullying, the self-hatred, the confusion of my own identity as an Asian American was all in that, and the things that I've done to hide from it, and the things I've done to also, it's really hard to say this, but it was a lot of self-hatred, a lot of self-hatred and denial, a ton of denial growing up, and how I was going through all of that, and how a lot of it uncovered while the documentary was being filmed, speaking with academia. The interview questions that they had for me were really, we went really deep. So we uncover a lot of all of these topics being discussed and go into a little bit of the modeling world too. Because a lot of people don't realize, even being in the modeling world, it's the same injustices and it's the same feeling of not feeling sexy, and just on an amplified level because you're Asian man. You are literally considered the lowest of desirable to be in a photo shoot in the whole spectrum of models. You know, there's always a ranking, and white female models are number one, and then it goes down in the rank, and then Asian men are the last on the rank. So they go through all of that as well, and they found that very interesting, and well, why are you still in it and all that stuff. And I just go off on that, and the documentary shares a lot about that.
What's the name of this documentary so others can look it up?
The name of the documentary is, so the real name right now is called The Ugly Model, Redefining Asian Masculinity. They're actually in the middle of changing it. That was just the project name. So the name of the title will be coming out soon. But if you want to know more information, you just go on my Instagram handle or my website and just email me, and I'll definitely respond one-on-one to anybody who responds for that, to give more information on it when it comes out.
Yeah, so jumping along this tagline of self-hatred and self-love and more so just this hierarchy, I think a lot of Asian men for many years, almost a decade now, have come out and talked about this, from influencers to just, your anonymous YouTube comments. And it can be tough, and a lot of them get very bitter behind this, and some of them, they don't do anything about it. They just, get angry at the world and tear others down sometimes. So what can you talk about this? Like how would you recommend handling this?
Hey, that's a very good topic to discuss right now, Will, because growing up, the angry Asian man came from a lot of resentments and anger. And I found out Resentment is very much like drinking poison and hoping the other person's going to die. And all it does is hurt myself. And it hurts Asian men every time I act out in that way. Or the biggest thing that I see with a lot of Asian men right now who we are getting a voice and empowerment right now is that they will look at other Asian women who are self-hating in many ways and talking shit on Asian men and telling them that they aren't sexy, that they need to act this way, they need to be a man. And by the way, that's not the majority, obviously. That's actually a minority, but it's still out there. And we focus on that, and instead of just recognizing it as someone self-hating, they're actually in pain. Because it's a real phrase when I say this, hurt people hurt other people. And when you're hurting, you will actually go out of your way to hurt other people to make yourself feel better. And I'm just talking about my own personal experience and knowing a little bit about psychology and how I coach my own people through this. But I know for me, I hated the identity of being an Asian man because it was seen like as an inferior race. Maybe it wasn't like, and I don't want to offend anybody out there, but it wasn't like black rights or anything. I mean, we didn't have the beatings and being pulled over or anything. It looks different for us, but it doesn't mean it's not it doesn't mean it can't be worked on and it's not a problem or a pain to solve. And a lot of us, we don't want to look at the other person and just forgive them or to say, hey, you know what? They're hurting actually. We are too. And then what ends up happening is we hurt the other person and they get mad and then they hate on us even more. Then we get mad and there's no problem being solved. Like for an example is, let's just pretend you were 200 pounds overweight and then your family starts ripping on you saying, Will, you got fat. What does that do? That actually hurts. But when was the last time you actually said, Will, you got fat, and you actually stopped and said, you know what, I'm going to lose weight then. You know, like it doesn't really happen that way. It's like your own realization through it. If anything, you actually don't like that person even more. And then you start picking out their own flaws and then you start growing a resentment towards them and nothing good happens from it. And that's why, I mean, I just heard this recently. I had a friend who was telling me about the story with their cousin saying, don't eat that, don't do that, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's actually part of the problem too, though. It's, they have to come through a realization, and usually a lot of this happens through storytelling, sharing your experience and how this has happened so they can relate to it and they can help themselves. Instead of keeping it real by calling people out and hurting other people, that's the wrong way too. And it's a very primitive and not a very classy way to do it. I think we have a chance as Asian men to rise above that and to do it in a way that's classy, that is productive, that makes both sides, Asian men and Asian women, feel empowered instead of taking it away from them. And I think we have a great opportunity at this if we can just get over that resentment.
Got it. So what I'm getting at, what seems to be your message here is that we should, form a community. We should share our stories with other people rather than just leaving, comments or just, holding that bitterness and anger towards how unfair this world is against other people.
Absolutely. I mean, our stories will empower other people, especially if we can find empowerment through our stories. So instead of looking at self-pitying stories, because there are some self-pitying piss poor stories out there, like, oh, I'm skinny, I'm an Asian guy, no girl like me. No, maybe just that girl didn't like you, And that's where I share in my TED Talk that it's not that I actually wanted to be a white person at one point in my life. It's just that I wanted to be treated like a hot white guy or something, because they get treated so differently from all races. And what it was too, going back to that with the documentary about the self-pitying, is that it's not like I'm like that anymore, but it's the first thought that comes to my head too sometimes, right? but it's my action afterwards that really counts the most. Am I, for instance, a single guy who looks at an Asian girl that's really hot, or a white girl, whatever, and say, oh, she probably doesn't like me because she's super hot, and nobody likes Asian guys. That could be a first thought. That's real.
Mm-hmm.
But it's what you do afterwards. Do you realize that it's a conditioning that we had growing up? Like I shared in a TED Talk. It was conditioned in my head that I wasn't attractive because I was Asian. The rejection, when girls said I don't like Asian guys, that was a conditioning. But eventually I broke out of that. But it doesn't mean it's still not there once in a while, but it's what I do afterwards. And then you can condition yourself afterwards to realize, hey, you know what? The world is a little bit better. I don't have to listen to these self-hating Asian women. And actually, the less I actually pay attention to them and don't give them attention, the less power you give them, and they're probably not going to want to do it as much. So they're just like attention-seeking girls, It's just whatever. Girls are, especially Asian girls right now, I find are going through their own shit too. And when we lack a sense of compassion and empathy for that too, and don't realize that they too are going through their same shit of insecurities, and they're doing it, and they're denying a lot of stuff too, then we can actually start changing our vision and the way we look at them, and maybe even try to build them up a little bit. And I know that goes counterintuitive because a lot of Asian guys will, what about me? But it is about you too, because if you can help them out, it helps out our whole race as a culture too, as a figure, because we empower one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very deep. So speaking of stories, I want to kind of reveal one of my own stories. So, the thought you had with, this what you said about having thoughts about like, oh, someone won't like me because I'm Asian. That's very common for me. I'm sure it's very common for many of our listeners. For me, I think a few times in particular, it's really hit home. And for one instance I remember was when I was on YouTube and I was streaming, and I decided to go on something called Chat Roulette. And this was something that just, if you're not familiar, it used to be very popular. You would go on and you would just be matched with random people all across the world. Mm. And this was one of those instances where you just ended up running into a bunch of people who were very racist off the bat. They would, just call you very offensive names and just leave. That's kind of what the internet kind of propels out there. Right. And I was very offended. Like they didn't give me a chance to talk back or anything. They're just like ching chong ching, and they left. And it was tough because they didn't respect me as a accomplished man who could even speak English. But later on I chose not to define every white person or person because of that, and I tried my best despite situations like that to see everyone as an equal. And it's helped me through, and it's helped me make a lot of friends of many different ethnicities, because I didn't, just because these people were mean to me doesn't mean that every white person thinks of me first through race. I've met some great people who just treat me very kindly and appreciate me. And, especially at my workplace, I think everyone is very kind to me, and it's one of those things where if you're willing to consider other possibilities, it's there. But if you close off your mind and just assume, well, the rest of the world is this way, you can kind of confirm what you think.
Absolutely, man. I was actually just thinking about what you were saying about confirming how the world is by the way we think, because as we all know, have you ever said, oh, you know what, I really want a Ferrari, and then all of a sudden all these advertisements on social media show up Ferraris for you? Mm-hmm. And the beautiful part about that is we can block that out too. And what I'm going along with that is all these forums, all these things we look on online, we're getting tagged by all these other forums. So basically we are creating our own reality now by the things that we look at, view, click on, even more so than normal. And it's hard to get out of that because I still do, I just don't look at this stuff anymore, but a lot of Asian empowerment groups. I say that with air quotes because it's not very empowering. It's just a bunch of people that get really mad at each other and say hateful stuff. And the people say, is this bullshit or not? And it's like, bullshit! And then everybody gets mad. And then the problem is you see more of this stuff. I mean, I had it with one of the forums out there. I was like, dude, all your stuff is just throwing out negative, hateful forums. Mm-hmm. And this is the problem, though. People want to read it. That sells. And unfortunately, that's part of the problem. We're not actually putting out a lot of the empowering things out there for us, like what really great Asian men are doing, or women, or overcoming, or even podcasts like this. We're only putting out this negative stuff, mm-hmm. and more people click on it. And then all the algorithms tell us, well, that's what Will must like. He must like these chat groups because he keeps on clicking on it. Mm-hmm. And then the more bullying happens, and then that's a problem. And the moment that I stopped doing that, I actually stopped getting all those posts coming up from all these Asian empowerment groups that were negative. And I started seeing a lot more better stuff. I do believe we have to watch what we click on. And another thing too, it's like social media is a powerful tool. I mean, that's how we found each other. Mm-hmm. We're also getting a little bit overwhelmed with it. I mean, I often give a tip to a lot of my coaching clients. And I'm a big component of this thing called intermittent fasting, but I think we need to actually start fasting from social media. Mm-hmm. And I think when you find that you fast from social media, you're going to find these impulses that are very similar to addictions like cigarette smoking, the habits of it. And if we start doing that and actually clearing our mind and clearing the algorithms and all of that stuff, I think we're going to start getting a better mindset for that too, because I'm telling you, whatever you're clicking on, it's going to show up, more of it. And then it conditions us again, like I said before, to believe that more. And it gets harder and harder. But the more you go out there and you start asking people out or start asking for better jobs and you start getting it, then that conditions you to start doing more of it and succeeding in it. It might be a little tough. You might get 1 out of 10, but that's normal. Mm-hmm. I hate to sound like this. A yes for dating, 1 out of 10 is kind of normal for people. Mm-hmm. And then you'll get into a flow, obviously, and it'll start to really get good for you. But it's hard in the beginning. You know, it's not easy. I think that's what we all expect. It's just going to be always easy in the beginning. And I also think this as Asian men, yeah, man, if I were to be honest, we do have to work harder for stuff. That stuff's a reality. But I don't have to be paralyzed by it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
When I started to see being an Asian man as a strength and my uniqueness that I can bring to the world, that's when all this stuff started to really happen for me. When I stopped seeing it as a weakness, a self-pitying tool, a way to be lazy or just give up and start blaming other people or calling names or getting a high from calling out all these women on whatever tools you want to go on and forums. When I stopped doing that and started focusing my energy and attention to something else useful, it starts happening, man. You know, I think a lot of us are just wasting our energy and time on all these dumb shit that doesn't fucking matter.
Absolutely. I completely agree with everything you just said there. I mean, Charlie Munger says, you know, the worst sin is envy because it's the only non-pleasurable sin. Plus, he also says that, you know, self-pity is just a waste of time because you're not actually improving your life by just, you know, wasting it, feeling bad for yourself. So absolutely true. And it's also great that you recommend taking a fast from social media because that's something I recommend too. And it's hard as influencers to do that when you're following and sometimes your livelihood is based off social media. But I say the exact same thing in a lot of my emails and blog posts. And I say it because others aren't willing to say it because even though they know it's good advice, they're not willing to do what's best for others because it hurts their own livelihood or whatever. But I think, you know, what's more important is helping others. And sometimes you end up making more money by doing that anyways. So get off Instagram and Facebook for a week or maybe even a month and see what happens.
So I think that's a good advice, and what I recommend a lot of people doing, unless you make your living off of it, it's a little bit harder, to try to do And I'm trying this experiment myself. I'm interested to see what happens, but time restricted social media. For instance, I practice intermittent fasting, which just means 16 hours of the day I don't eat, and I have an 8-hour window to do it 2 or 3 times, like eating meals or snacks in between. What I find is going to be helpful and what I've been doing so far, in just a very short period of time, so I can't say this is absolutely working, but I took a fast from social media, and then I started doing intermittent fasting with social media, which means I have an 8-hour time window to look at anything, but I'm only giving myself 2 times to actually answer messages, to look at things, to get messages back, and maybe one intermittently just to like look at, I don't know, you accidentally your thumb clicks on it because it's a knee-jerk reaction sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that'll sometimes happen, but what I'm doing is I'm giving myself a time-restricted period every day to do social media twice, just like intermittent fasting, that kind of way. So I'm mimicking the same benefits as intermittent fasting for food, but with social media.
Yeah, Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income, like a really popular podcast, he does the same thing, and he says it really helps you, prevents you from getting sucked into that addiction.
Right, so you kind of look at it like, for instance, the whole idea of intermittent fasting is you don't have breakfast first thing in the morning, so you can focus on other things and let your body and all those hormones recover. That's a whole nother subject. But with intermittent social fasting, you're not putting your focus and attention first thing in the morning on getting envious by looking at Instagram and looking at all these people with perfect lives and bodies and photos. Mm-hmm. You're setting your mind up straight by possibly taking a hot shower or whatever, taking care of your actual needs first before you start doing that. And that's the beautiful thing about not having social media first thing in the morning. You're setting yourself up to win that way.
Yeah. So let's talk about masculinity. Mm-hmm. I think that's a huge topic. For me, myself, I've been kind of going on a, reflection process in the last 2 years and really learned a lot about myself and uncovered, sometimes self-hatred that I didn't even know was there. Sometimes it can manifest in many ways, and sometimes it's good and bad. For me, exercise, for example, has been, there's good and bad parts to it. Sometimes it's fantastic for health and focus, but other times, if you mentally approach it the wrong way, for me at least, you can end up, it can be a way of manifesting self-hatred, because you're not happy with how you are, and you'll never be happy because you're not rich enough or muscular enough. So can you talk about, your story in masculinity?
Masculinity is a very common thing going on right now with men. And I think it's a great topic to discuss, especially for Asian men, because we have the same masculinity issues that other men go through, but just in a different way, because through media and culture and through also the way we were conditioned, we were told we weren't attractive and we weren't portrayed a certain way. So if I don't see somebody like me that I can identify on TV, media, magazines, we often feel not only left out, but we have to look a certain way, maybe even like a white person, to be seen as attractive. So the thing about masculinity that I confused it with was I just thought because I got bigger muscles, I would be masculine by default. That's a very misconception of masculinity. Trust me, I'm still 100% person that says, you know what? As an overall masculine man, you should exercise. You should take care of your body. That is a masculine trait. Mm-hmm. Taking care of yourself is a masculine energy. It's a trait. Not taking care of yourself is a weak trait. It shows lack of discipline, shows lack of impulse control. It shows that you don't really care for yourself. It says that you're probably a people pleaser. You will eat like crap whenever you're around people just so like they're not judging you or saying something. It can go on, but that to me, fitness is often a foundation, I think, for masculinity, just because it teaches you so many disciplines and does all these things for you, which I think is amazing. You know, your testosterone levels go up, and testosterone's associated with masculinity. But the thing is the masculine energy that a lot of men give off doesn't really come from that. Like, you can fake it by looking masculine, which is great. You know, it works for a little bit. Mm-hmm. But the real masculinity, what they say, is that inner confidence you have. And a book that really attracted me was The Warrior Within by Bruce Lee. And he talks about that inner drive, the purpose that you might have. And I love that about Bruce Lee. And then I read another book about The Ways of the Superior Man.
David Titus.
It's amazing. Yeah. And it totally reaffirmed what I was doing in my life. It's not like he puts it in a different perspective, right? It's about energies. But what ended up happening with me is because I was very insecure growing up, because I did let what people say in the past affect who I am and my choices and what I do in my life. I used to. And I say the word used to because a lot of people hear this and say, Kevin, so insecure, he does it. I'm like, no, you have to hear it was past tense, not present tense or future tense. And women used to really dictate who I am. I was very dependent on women, which is an unmasculine trait, because now who I am dictates my confidence and my happiness on another person. And that's not a masculine trait. That's a very unempowering trait. And when I give my only thing that I can have, which is my power, the way I feel good about myself, my happiness, to another person, another woman in my case, she has all the power. And it's also unfair for her. And then the relationship starts to dwindle and struggle. And then there's a lot of resentments, like we were talking about earlier. And then there's a lot of insecurity and yelling. There's a lot of I'm sorry's going on. And there's a lot of amends and everything. And it just gets ugly when you're not actually secure in your masculine energy, your traits and masculinity. And yes, health and fitness is part of it, how you take care of yourself. But also masculinity is about what's your purpose, right? What are you doing to fulfill your own purposeful journey? Just like, I think it was David, right, talks about a little bit. And the moment that I was able to find a lot more purpose in my life, then a woman comes along, she doesn't stray me away from that. And I also get to remain who I am. In the past, a lot of women would come into my life and I'd forget who I am. I'd be the most disciplined person. I would eat really well, but then a woman comes around in my life. I start taking on the bad habits of her. And I'm just,
who you are.
Right. I'm just saying bad habits because they weren't good habits for me.
Mm-hmm.
Sleeping in late, staying up extremely late, not eating my own food or cooking what I like, and all of a sudden forgetting I'm lactose intolerant, like all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then forgetting what my real purpose was, which is actually more coaching and life coaching, like what I'm doing right now, more of, and speaking in this kind of format. And then I'd go right back into modeling 100%. And I'm like, what am I doing? You know, I enjoy modeling, but that's not my inner calling. Mm-hmm. If modeling went the next day, I might miss it because it's like a good income, but it's like it was a part of me for a while, but it's not going to stray me from what I'm doing right now. But women used to do that for me. That was my kryptonite a lot. And now because I'm more secure in my masculinity, what I do, and realize it's not just an outer, it is also an inner. Like, trust me, like the outer is important because people are going to snap judge you like that. It's just a fact of life, unfortunately, you know? Mm-hmm. They're just going to snap judge that. But you have an opportunity, if you don't have the outer, to portray your inner. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying Asian men have the opportunity for both, not just one, you know? And I just think we don't take advantage of that either because, you know, I hate to sound like this. Too many of us get a little too intellectual with this. Mm-hmm. And masculinity is not an intellectual thing. We can think about it all day, but if it's not in us and we don't cultivate it in us, we're never going to have it.
Yeah. This reminds me a lot of the book "No More Mr. Nice Guy" by Dr. Robert Glover. It's a very famous book in this arena, and he really talks about how, you know, as nice guys, it's often disguised for self-approval, validation, anxiety, managing tons of anxiety.
Yeah.
And what he recommends, two big things, is seeking other men's groups, support groups. You don't have to do this alone. And then the second big thing is do something for yourself. Don't always do stuff, for other people's approval or opinions or happiness. That's all fine to want to help other people and, try and maintain a problem-free life, but you will have problems in life and you have to, do your own thing. For me, I've definitely I still have a very similar vice with women, seeking validation and doing things because of them, oftentimes, at the detriment of really my own values. So I think that's incredibly important what you talk about. I think that's one of the defining points where I think a lot of Asian millennial men really start to perk up and see some differences between races, because that's when they see, hey, how come I'm not getting, the same responses or reactions? You want to talk a little bit more about how you've gone through this process
of discovering masculinity and
dealing with just the different problems with dating that you've come across?
Oh yeah, man. So I won't do any spoiler alerts, but in the documentary, there was a Tinder date set up, and she totally agreed to be on the Tinder date, signed the release. She knew there was cameras on her. And we're at the sushi restaurant, and I literally said, "Do you find Asian men attractive?" And she was like, "Meh." And I'm like, oh, God, here we go again, right? And the funny part, for me at least, was it was a black woman. And that's not the first time black women have said to me, "I don't know if you'd be strong enough to handle me." Mm-hmm. And also, I can't really analyze that culture or how they were brought up, but there is still at times that I get that. And the difference is now I can point it out and I can say, well, that was that black girl that said that to me. And I can move on from that. And when I can start doing that, I can give the chance to the next black girl who isn't like that to start dating or something. Because I've been on dates with all races and all colors. Mm-hmm. And very few now these days ever say like, yeah, I was a little hesitant with you because you're an Asian guy. No, like you don't hear that very much. And in the past, it used to be, well, I actually haven't seen many Asian guys like you. And the older I've gotten and the more exposed they've gotten, the less I hear that. Which is good. It's a great thing to hear that, You don't want to hear that you're the only Asian person that they've ever met they found attractive. In the beginning it feels good because it's a nice little ego stroke, but then when you realize it's still hurting you, it's a backhanded compliment and it's a microaggression of racism, of whatever, prejudice or just ignorance, then you start to actually see it as like not a compliment. And then it starts to eat at you a little bit and you internalize it. Then you get mad. And then you start to, and in all honesty, there's years that I used to just blame other people for it, right? I didn't want to hold myself accountable and say, well, you know what? I hate to sound like this, Kev. You really are the only person that makes you feel a certain way. And, this is years of going through it and talking and coaching, getting coached myself or having a mentor or somebody to point out shit for me. And when I learned that, I was like, oh, of course I didn't want to hear that right away. But as I started to realize my life got smaller when I started to believe all that shit, then I finally just gave up and I was like, all right, let's see what this is all about. Obviously I didn't say that physically. It was a whole mind body experience for that, Sounds like I'm talking about acid, but I'm not. It was a realization for me that it was just, man, I can move on from this. I don't have to look at the past and live in it anymore. And it's so easier said than done. But when you actually start to go get rid of these resentments towards these people who have hurt you in the past and realize, man, they are going through their own shit. Oh my God, like your life just changes. There's a girl from high school who I had a little mini crush on. And I thought she ignored me because she was white. She didn't find me attractive. And I was always like, why does she always ignore me? And just recently, I just found out she's a lesbian. Like, she was going through her own shit. I didn't even have a chance to begin with. Neither did any other guy. Mm-hmm. But she was also so internally struggling with her identity as a lesbian that she didn't have time, you know, to like pay attention to my own shit of struggling internally about being an Asian guy. Mm. You know, and I was lucky to discover that, but it was a whole realization in my life that other people are internalizing and struggling with their own internal things too. And when I started to realize that, I could let go of all of that past baggage and start to move forward from it. And the more I move forward from it, the less I start to see that in my world. And it's a beautiful thing, man. But that's a big part of my journey of the masculinity and just talking to people about it who have a light to them. You know, I don't talk to people like this who are pissed off and hate Asian women or call Asian women all these bad names or just have you can tell that they're still angry, right?
Yeah.
I don't really talk to too many people like that. Unless they talk to me and ask me for help. Because then my world will start to look like theirs. And they have nothing to offer me. I employ, and this is kind of a recommendation, you don't have to take it, but if you are in that circle, you will start to become that circle. And your peer group is really important on who you surround yourself by, who you listen to, who you get influenced by. And if you're around just a ton of people like that, just shit talking all the time like that, you will become one of them, or your thoughts will become one of them. And you just need to follow some people that have it. And I did that with my own life, you know, like there was people that thank God, a good friend of mine growing up, he would always challenge my thoughts a little bit, but not saying you're wrong. He would just give me questions. Is that really true? You know, like just stuff like that, just trying to get me to think for myself and come up with my own answers too, which is, I think, really important for people out there listening, or yourself or myself too. Like I question a lot of stuff that I do myself too. And I think it's really important that we question, but in a good way, instead of just saying like a definite, all Asian women think all Asian guys have small penises. It's ridiculous too, right? I mean, I'm sure there's a couple or a few out there who do, but I'm also sure there's many who don't. Yeah. You know, it's like, it's just bizarre, you know, when you really look at it that way.
Yeah, and, you know, I've met some black women who are really sexually interested in Asian men.
Oh, yeah,
for some reason. Timothy De La Ghetto recently married his fiance, who's African American. So great stuff. This is getting really deep, and I love it. Really positive stuff here. I think I want to cover all aspects of the Asian male community, because not everyone is the same. I recently sat down with a follower of mine, an email subscriber, for a quick chat in person, and he surprised me. He did not have any problems or interest in dating at the moment. He was very much like me, millennial, making a modest wage in I think science, and he really only cared about other aspects of self-development. Specifically, he wanted to make more money. That was like his sole goal in life. Right. So, you know, I don't want to get, you know, too deep here and assume things, but do you think only focusing on money making is a potential symptom of neglecting other areas of life, or is this perfectly normal and healthy? And if so, like any tips in that arena? Because you've accomplished quite a lot. You know, you're a speaker, you're more muscular and successful in the health and fitness industry than most Asians.
Right. So I was just thinking of this phrase. I was like, ooh, muscle and money. That's what we all want, right? But here's the thing about money. And I think what a lot of Asian men might fall under the trap of is that we feel like we're helpless except for making money. And the one thing that I think a lot of us don't want to admit is that we feel like we're broken at times. We don't feel like we're as good, or, I'm flawed. And it's just, we're all flawed in so many ways, right? Everybody is. We all have things we can work on until the day we die, unfortunately. But it's an opportunity to work on it. But I think a lot of us think, I just read this quote that a lot of us think that we just need to be ourselves. Well, the problem with that is when we use that phrase, let me just be myself. It's bullshit. If I was just going to be myself, I would still be that skinny, awkward Asian guy who doesn't take care of his skin or eats whatever he wants, who is very unathletic, who is so insecure, who couldn't speak like this to anybody. I was considered very quiet growing up. I don't know if people know this, but like Tourette syndrome, like I would still have Tourette syndrome and tics and all this stuff going on, probably never talking to girls if I was just being myself. I wanted to be the better version of myself. And I know that sounds cheesy as shit, but it's like, it's still you, but you're always striving to be better. I have this phrase where I say, I'm happy, but I'm not content. What I mean by that is like, I'm always wanting more, which is fine. The thing is, I think too many Asian men have this idea that I'll make more money, things will go away. It's not true. Money gives you the luxury to be able to work on yourself even more than other people have the opportunity to do. You can hire the best coaches. You can hire the best trainers, nutritionists, motivational speakers, life coaches, whatever, or buy the courses and go on vacation and get those massages or do that yoga class or whatever. You have the luxury to do everything. But we see it all the time, not just in the Asian community, but outside that community. They're not the happiest.
Yeah.
They put all their eggs in making money. And I think Asians think that's all they're good for almost, which is also a problem. But I'll tell you what, I mean, and this is a lot of people, Asian men. I won't even talk about myself in this sense, but there's a ton of Asian men who have the most expensive clothes and most expensive cars. And I can guarantee some of these people who don't focus on money have the best charisma, have a light, have an attraction to them, and they're wearing H&M. Actually, probably most of those fuckers who are wearing H&M have more confidence and charisma and everything than these people driving these cars. The loudest person that I see in the room is usually the most insecure. The reason why I know is because I was one of them. The guy like trying to get all these bottle services, trying to get the car, the fancy clothes, like all this stuff, And look, I'm very good at like being in a crowd and speaking, but it's like those people who are just trying to throw money at their problems. It's like, it's the problem too. And that's where I think it's good to want to make money. It is. But there's also what you were saying earlier. Is that it? No. I mean, like actually doing things that are really fulfilling for you, that have a purpose for it. That's more important than actually making money, because look, there's a certain level of comfort we need to hit. But if it's not food, shelter, and water, we're fucking going overboard with everything, And I get it. We have a very comforting lifestyle that we live here, but if you're just chasing the dollar, yeah, you might succeed in that, but it doesn't make you masculine. Money doesn't buy masculinity. Money doesn't buy confidence either. And it's just, I found that out the hard way. I mean, I wasn't a multimillionaire, but definitely when I was younger, I made quite a bit, and I was not happier. It's very short term. And, the thing that I love about improving yourself, about fitness, nutrition, improving yourself, like what you were talking about, is that it's not dictated on if somebody buys something from me. It's not dictated on the market going up and down. It's not dictated if Bitcoin goes down. It's a very simple strategy, and you follow it, you will get results. It's just how it goes. It's not dictated on the weather or the season. It really is just dictated on Will or Kevin, I don't mean to hit you, but it's just like it's dictated on you. And that's the beautiful part. You can go as far as you want with it. And that gives confidence because you are following something that is good for you. You start seeing results and you're more likely to do more of it. And that gives you a lot of confidence, a lot of momentum, and it carries out throughout the rest of your life. You can hear lots of successful people talk about that. that they weren't happy when they made money, but when they started to take care of themselves and improve, not just health, but everything else in their lives, that's when it all started to happen. You can read about with Ariana Huffington, you know, she was totally wealthy beyond belief, but it wasn't until she started taking care of that other part of her life that she was able to become even more successful and more happy and not get burnt out. And it's just, I can't really stress how much I get it. Making money looks cool, but what else are you going to do with it?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I actually wrote a whole article just compiling together all these successful people who are wealthy but not happy, and also an article on the science of happiness. They did all these international studies correlating money with happiness, and they found this very well documented scientific concept called hedonic treadmill or hedonic adaptation. So if you guys want to check out those articles, I'll leave a link in the show notes. Do you have any big tips, big parting tips for Asian American millennial men who they accept what you're saying, but now they want to know, okay, what's the next action step I can take to improve?
Right. So the next action step that I would give to Asian millennial men is to really be confident in your identity. You can't get rid of your Asian identity. You can try to hide it and try to blend in, but it actually looks more ridiculous when you're trying to be somebody you're not. I implore a lot of Asian men to really look at themselves, which is the hardest part, and try to work on yourself, man, your weaknesses, your strengths. I know a lot of people say just focus on your strengths, but if your weakness is being a dick, I really recommend you work on that because that will really help you a lot in the long run. It's just not being a dick and not being a bully. I know what it's like to be a bully. That's part of my TED Talk that I did, and it didn't feel good at the end. And I just don't want to see us being a bully after being bullied for so long. I think that's an opportunity we can take to rise above that, like I said earlier. And to, whether you're fat, short, overweight, skinny, whatever, you can be masculine. You don't have to have muscles. I do it because I like the way it looks and makes me feel, but like, if that's not your forte and you like running and that makes you feel good, confident, masculine, do it. If it's ping pong, do it. But I do believe movement creates that. Movement creates masculinity and energy, obviously, and whatever movement it is for you, do it. But if it's behind a desk, being a CEO and just making money and being gluttonous and not taking care of yourself, no, that's not masculine. You will feel it at the end of it. And I also believe that if you want, just look up to people that you admire, that you want more of, and start learning from them too, because I had to do the same thing, and to also realize that you are not the center of the universe that gave all knowledge to. For instance, I had mentors, mentees, I have role models, I've read books, I've gone to seminars, I've coaches, everything. And I think a lot of us don't want that. We don't want to hear it, and I'm speaking not just from my own personal experience, but I know from other people who just think they know it. And look, we're very intelligent as Asian men, but I think that's also our fault, is that we think we're too intelligent too. And sometimes, if you, like Bruce Lee says, just empty the cup just a little bit and just let other knowledge come in from other people who are maybe more successful in certain areas, dating, relationships, fitness, whatever. I think we could grow huge as an Asian American culture, because right now we aren't seen as cool. But do you remember a time when comic books were seen as cool? I remember when it wasn't cool, back in second grade. Magic the Gathering wasn't seen as cool. Now it's freaking rave. Everybody's wanting to buy comic books and be in a Marvel movie and buying magic cards. I don't know if you remember magic cards, but I do. Yeah. But, you know, we as Asian men have that opportunity, and it's happening. And I think we have a way to mold it and redefine what it's like to be an Asian man for us, that people want to see us as, right? Not instead of letting Asian women define it for us, or white men, or whatever, or media, culture. You doing this is defining what it's like to be an Asian man too. And we have a lot of room to grow, and we will fuck up at times. I'm not saying this is going to be a perfect process, but we will mess up, but we got to learn from that and pull up our bootstraps and move forward and try not to do the same mistakes again. And I just think it's one of those things where you have a great opportunity. It's happening. The tables will turn. And I just want to ask you, like, what side do you want to be on? Do you want to be part of the one that helped to turn for their positive light, or are you going to be part of the negative light? Are you going to be part of the problem? So you have a choice. You know, I just hope you're part of the solution of it. That's all. And a lot of this stuff is hearsay. Take what you want, and you know, maybe a year or two from now you'll listen to this again and it'll change your mind. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've read a book, then 10 years later read it again. It's like, oh my God, that makes sense. Or stuff I highlighted, I was like, oh my God, I was in a really dark time like when I read that and highlighted it. And it's just amazing how maybe you'll hear this and 5 years later, just listen again, it might make more sense to you.
Do you think is there one defining thing that has helped you achieve the success you have, not just externally, but externally and internally? Is it willpower? Is it focus, meditation, journaling?
That's great. Okay, so
hard work.
I believe in hard work, but I also believe in focused work, because anybody can be busy and work hard, right? It's just, this is producing results for you, is producing results for other people. I found the moment that I started to not just believe in myself, but have a faith, right? To really trust a faith, or a group that I could put a focus on. So for instance, if I'm just thinking about myself all the time, it's a lonely place. But if I think of a community, and especially for me, I will be honest, I really turned my back on the Asian community for a long time. Like I was saying before, because I thought it was weak. I didn't want to identify with the Asian American community, because all my life growing up, white people made fun of Asian people all the time. Black people made fun of Asian people all the time. And I didn't want to be part of that. Nobody wants to feel worse, you know? Mm-hmm. And the moment I started to play in the other sandbox of being in an Asian American community and having good friends in the Asian American community, dating Asian women, right? It started to really just open my world up a lot. And I got to learn from other people, other cultures, races. And that's when I started to find strength in myself too. And it's not easy, but let me tell you, there's a lot less resistance to it. It feels right. It feels more right than it ever did. And that's what I mean. Like, you'll find when it's right. And what I'm saying, I guess, is just play in other people's sandboxes. Like, don't ignore your own culture, your race. Start to love it, embrace it. It doesn't mean all of a sudden you gotta wear, if you're American, it doesn't mean you all of a sudden have to, like, go to Chinatown and pick up a job in Chinatown or something. It doesn't mean that. It just means appreciating it, because that is part of you too. Mm-hmm. And just appreciate more of it, and you'll find a lot more joy in your life. It sounds really cheesy. I kind of hate saying that, but you will. You just find a lot more joy in your life when you start to really accept who you are, instead of fighting it so much.
Yeah, sometimes the cheesy and cliche stuff is the truest stuff. So thank you again, Kevin, for your time.
You're welcome, Will.
Once again, this was Kevin Kreider here. Any parting words, anything you want to plug?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I'm not very good at plugging, because the thing is, a lot of the stuff I do is definitely a lot of coaching and life coaching. And I have you can just go to my website. You can find more information about who I am, what I do, fitness, life coaching, possible live events in the future. Love to hear from you. Email me. Please give me feedback. Tell me what you need. Tell me what I could provide for you. And if you email me too, I can also send you a link for when the documentary trailer comes out. And it could always use some support and sharing or helping out with the funding to get it finished. That is also a big thing, because without obviously funding, the producers can't finish the documentary as well as they'd like, or the message, and it would just be a big help for that too. And I'm really here to find out how I can help you in any way, and really because I'm in the beginning phases of this too, just like a lot of people, in what I'm trying to do with my coaching services and everything. And if I can help you in any way, just let me know, because I'm really curious on how I can do that.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching.